Every single person in this audience got to know me as a personality first, and then got to know the philosophy, then got to know the political agenda, and then got to know the methods I want to use in pursuit of that political agenda after the fact. Imagine how different it would be if you had encountered à-bas-le-ciel as a faceless, leaderless organization, as a movement with a website asking you for donations that only stated the philosophy, that only stated the political aspirations, and that only stated the methodology, the methods wanted to use, and it completely denied that there was any kind of like cult leader behind it all, where there was just a mask with no face, shall we say. This is the pattern I see again and again and again in veganism as a movement and in the various 21st century ecological movements, whether or not they're specifically attached to global warming, carbon dioxide levels, this sort of thing. You guys may remember my criticism of a totally faceless organization that was called Nation Rising. Right there. What is Nation Rising? It doesn't even sound like a vegan movement. Well, Nation Rising has inexplicably rebranded and retitled itself, quote, Canadians for Responsible Food Policy, close quote. So that's the name of their YouTube channel today. They still have the logo up saying Nation Rising, which is quite understandable because for many years that was the brand they built up. They have not quite so suddenly changed brand as Twitter. Twitter is now X. So I'm looking at the website, the YouTube channel for Canadians for Responsible Food Policy, and it's somewhat amusing to me. I see the X logo. There's the X logo in the corner now instead of the Twitter logo. I assume years from now it will have gone back to using the Twitter logo. And people watching this video in the future are like, what? X? What is he talking about? So there have been some bizarre rebranding exercises in technology this year. One of them being Twitter being suddenly renamed as X. Well, okay, so rebrand and renaming, that's one thing. But here's something even more striking. Now there's one person, one personality with one name and one face. And in fact, it's a conventionally good-looking blonde woman who reveals herself as the founder of the group. I noticed she consistently says founder rather than leader, but she is not just the founder. She is, of course, the unelected, self-appointed dictator for life of the movement. And by the way, it's the majority of nonprofit organizations have a self-appointed, unelected dictator for life. It's kind of an industry practice that's widely accepted. I personally don't accept it, but I'm an eccentric. So, and her name is Jenny Henry. Now, Jenny Henry has absolutely zero charisma. She has absolutely zero interesting ideas about philosophy or politics or methodology or anything else. And she has a video that's coming up on its 1-year anniversary now. You can, if you click on this, I'll give you guys the link. You can see what I mean by saying she's an attractive blonde. I'm not saying, I would assume in her youth, in her prime, she was a much better looking woman than Nina and Randa. Who is that girl? Essena O'Neill. I think she probably in her youth, she was a better looking woman than Essena O'Neill was. And she's a better looking woman now than Essena O'Neill is today. So she's someone who's had a lot of advantages in terms of her appearance. Nevertheless, despite being a good looking blonde woman in the prime of her life, shall we say, this video, which is not just coming up on its 1-year anniversary, so it says 11 months, but it's a few days short of a 12-month year. It has 77 views, and I think 2 of them are me. Maybe one of them is Melissa. So we should probably say 75 views. And now some of you people will click on it and take a look. So I left a comment saying, look, guys, I get more views on a very boring book review video. What a peculiar pattern. Wouldn't the world be a different place if Jenny Henry up front, if she were the product, if she were the personality, if from day one it had been support Jenny Henry and her mission. And Jenny Henry published a book, perhaps not called No More Manifestos, perhaps called 100 New Manifestos by Jenny, whatever the hell her philosophy or ideology was. And everyone involved knew who and what they were supporting. Again, not just abstract ideals, right? Also specific ambitions, specific objectives, specific methods to achieve those objectives. And I would remind you of my criticism of Black Lives Matter from many, many years ago. Just as important as the methods you say you will use, just as important or more important are the methods you say you will never use, right? Here are things we're going to do. Here are things we refuse to do, right? Like terrorism. There are a lot of things. If you're in politics, you have to make it very clear what you will never do, what you won't get involved in. It can matter much more than the things you will do. Okay, so some number of supporters got involved in this group when it went through a period of being faceless, supposedly leaderless movement. If you guys don't know, I'll write this out for you. There's a bit of academic German, acephalous. So why it is in their early stage, and it's not just an early stage of organization, but also, of course, an early stage of fundraising, of soliciting donations, they want you to imagine the donations are not going into a particular bank account that has a particular person's name on it, who decides how that money is spent. Now, I will just ask the question. So Jenny Henry, as founder, as a matter of speculation, has she decided what would be done with 100% of the money donated to this group? If she only decided 50% of what would be done with money, who else decided? You know what I mean? Again, some organizations are a husband and wife team. Some organizations are headed by a group of 5 people, and they actually record their roundtable meetings. It's rare. The vast majority of these nonprofits, whether they're explicitly political or they're more of an ecological organization, it's one person, it's one man, and your donations go into one person's pocket. The question is, do you know that person? Do you trust that person? Do you care? Do you respect that person? Are you even fucking interested in that person's ideas? And here's the ultimate question. Do you actually believe anything is going to change in the next 5 years? Because Jenny Henry, you piece of shit, I can look back at what you did in the last 5 years, and I can look ahead in the next 5 years and say it's going to be the same or it's going to be worse. All right? And I'll tell you one thing right now about Jenny Henry. Jenny Henry will never record a podcast with me. She will never record a YouTube video on this channel. She will never participate in anything that à-bas-le-ciel that this channel has going on, which is significant. In case you think there's a whole hell of a lot of talent in this vegan demi-monde for the world, I think there's a lot of talent in Canada. There's a lot of talent in Ottawa. I mean, Jesus Christ. Think about all the brilliant people she could have worked and collaborated with in, say, just the last 3 years, right? Think of all the people whom she could have sent an email to or who she could have replied. No, okay. So that's Jenny Henry and the so-called Canadians for Responsible Food Policy. All right. There used to be an organization called Animal Rebellion. Now, this is a uniquely British phenomenon. If there were an organization in Canada doing what Animal Rebellion did, the leaders of that organization, the representatives of that organization, would not be interviewed on mainstream television, would not be featured on mainstream radio, would not be promoted on the front page of newspapers. In England, unlike many other political cultures around the world, actually, those people get a whole hell of a lot of promotion out of legacy media is now the term I see being used, non-internet based media, old-fashioned media. I find this astonishing in many ways. So Piers Morgan in England has made Animal Rising famous. Nevertheless, on the YouTube channel, here's a video from 2 months ago that has 413 views. 1 month ago, they managed to get one with 1,100 views. And then the next one after that is 588 views. Their most recent video has only 357 views. So they are on mainstream radio, mainstream television, mainstream newspapers, and still. Now, here's the thing about Animal Rebellion. Animal Rebellion is not called Animal Rebellion anymore. They also have undergone a rebranding exercise. They have renamed themselves Animal Rising. Animal Rising. And they have revealed, what a surprise, beneath the seemingly professional, dehumanized exterior of their former website, there actually always was one woman who was their great leader all along. There was one, a reasonably good looking, not charismatic, not intelligent woman who was again the founder and leader of Animal Rising. So this big reveal came 3 months ago. So you guys might be, this is an incredibly boring video. I'll send it to you now. Now, again, some number of thousands of people signed up to support Animal Rising back when they were called Animal Rising. Some number of thousands of people donated some number of thousands of dollars. I don't know how much or how little money they have. You can get some indication in the UK. Maybe you can, maybe you can't actually for any given charity. Maybe you can get a financial report. Maybe you can find how much money they collect in donations. All right. Okay. But this organization, up until 3 months ago, you couldn't really ask a supporter, a donor, who are you donating to? You could only ask them, what are you donating to? You couldn't ask, who are you supporting? You could only ask, what are you supporting? And the answer they could give you, if they donated $1,000 to this group, 1,000 British pounds, whatever you want to say, they would have to say, oh, yeah. I donated because I support this philosophical ideal, because I support this political objective, or I support these methods, these means that are to be used in the pursuit of that objective. It was a mask without a face. There was a logo, there was a slogan, there was a philosophy, even if it was half a paragraph long, a few sentences of philosophy, not much philosophy, right? I would ask you, would you say a similar pattern happened with Black Lives Matter itself? The Black Lives Matter at one stage was an abstract idea, and then it was revealed who exactly the particular people were behind it and what actually was happening with the money, whose bank account this went into. Beyond the abstract ideals, there were particular people with particular bank accounts making particular decisions. Now, again, I'm asking you to kind of reflect on this. Yes, you. Not not that many people are going to see this video. We have 12 thumbs up and 4 people who haven't hit thumbs up for some reason. At this moment, there are only 16 people in the audience. It's a totally unannounced, spontaneous live stream. How would you feel if I had played the game by these same rules? If you had gotten to know my ideas before you got to know me, if you had become a supporter of my agenda without knowing the incredibly eccentric character behind it all, right? And you guys know the good and the bad about me. There are things about me you may find alarming, you may find terrifying. I just say, what kind of political leader do you want? Do you want someone who makes you feel comfortable? Do you want someone who makes you feel challenged? What kind of teacher do you want? Let's just say, so we got the Latin books in the background. So that was the moment. We've been both looking at Latin today, at studying Latin. If you want to talk about ancient Greek, ancient Latin philosophy, Thucydides, Herodotus, Sallust, take your pick. Do you want a teacher, just a form of philosophy and political philosophy that isn't that dangerous? We're not talking about burning down the House of Parliament or anything. We're talking about ancient Greece, ancient Rome. You want a teacher who makes you feel comfortable? You want a teacher who makes you feel challenged? I can say this about anything. Studying Chinese. Learning a foreign language like Chinese, which is hard work. You want to feel comfortable? You want to get uncomfortable, all right? Say again, I know this is seemingly off topic, but some of you know exactly why I'm saying this. When you look back at the history of drastic political change, whether it was accomplished with or without a revolution, when you look at sudden, drastic political change, sudden, drastic cultural change, okay, the leaders of those movements, the people who pressed for that change and the people who accomplished it, right? Who has suffered less? Right. I know it's real hard for some of you to tune in and hear me say that, I don't know, you're lazy, you're self-indulgent, you've devoted your life to owning and walking a dog and drinking alcohol and playing video games, and none of that's going to change. I know that's really hard to listen to, but in the history of the world, the people who actually made a difference, the people who actually changed it, especially when we're talking about sudden, drastic social change, they were the people who were willing to get uncomfortable. Sometimes they're people who slept in caves, people who slept on the kitchen floor, or what have you. Anyway, and a lot of time they're people who died. They lived under uncomfortable circumstances, and they died under uncomfortable circumstances as well. So if it's just too much to ask to even think these things through, if you're that uncomfortable with my personality, I'm comfortable with alienating you. I'm comfortable with alienating that larger audience, because those are people who lack the dynamism to make any kind of change, even a creative change, even to be involved in comedy, even to be involved in writing and illustrating new children's storybooks, even to be involved in cultural production, let alone some kind of sudden, drastic political change. As I say, another important category is sudden, drastic cultural change. So the two people I was just looking at, they're both quite attractive women. So one, the leader of Nation Rising under its new name, the other, the leader of Animal Rising, formerly Animal. You think? What do you think? You think they have what it takes to get on stage and be a stand-up comedian? just I'm not even asking you. Do you think they've read Herodotus? Do you think they've read Thucydides? Do you think they've read Plutarch? Like, do you think they're really on some very high level of political and philosophical sophistication or something? I'm not asking that question. I'm asking, do you think they have what it takes to write a children's storybook, a really great children's storybook, to be a filmmaker, to do something creative and positive in that sense, much less, right, to be a revolutionary leader with stark, bold new ideas? Now, guys, we were all young once. Can you remember the first time you ever heard of direct action everywhere? DXE, direct action everywhere. Direct action everywhere, when they started playing this game, were a completely faceless, acephalous, leaderless organization. Or so they said, or so they claimed, or so they pretended to be, right? So many thousands of people supported that group. Many thousands of people donated money to that group. The last time I checked, their annual budget was over $1 million a year. I don't know what it is now. I haven't checked for a couple of years, actually. Okay, but they built up more and more money until they had a budget of more than $1 million a year. A lot of money, a lot of support. People committed to supporting that organization during a period when there was the illusion that it was a fully horizontal organization, that they had no leaders at all. And guess what? It turned out there really was one man in charge. There really was one founder. There really was one leader. And ultimately, there really was one bank account, right? Plot twist. So let me ask. I'm doing the thought experiment. How many of those people would have ever cared about Extinction Rebellion? How many of those people would have ever cared about DXE, direct action everywhere, if they'd never played that game? They'd never had the period of being a mask without a face. If from day one, it was one man, he is a man, all in all, take him for what it is, right? What if from day one, it was just Wayne Xiong, with his little measure of brilliance and his little measure of charisma, right? With his philosophy, with his political theory, his analysis, right? What if you were judging him? What if you were trusting him and not a set of disembodied ideas, a disembodied abstract cause that's supposedly everywhere and nowhere at the same time, like Jesus? In this sense, Wayne Xiong is not like Jesus. There are some ways I concede in which he's very much like Jesus, actually, but not in this not in this respect. And again, I want to ask you, how differently would you regard me if I had emerged in this same way? First as this mask without a face, and then suddenly, jarringly, it's revealed to you who is the face behind this organization. Now, I've asked you the question. Some of you are casting your mind back, and remember this, some of you are. Can you remember the first time you ever heard of Direct Action Network? They received money, to my knowledge, from day one, but from a very, very early stage. They received money from the founder of PETA, Ingrid Newkirk, the founder and the most famous leader that PETA has ever had. Admittedly, there was more than one founder at the beginning, but Ingrid Newkirk has become the main leader, the main voice and face for PETA for many, many, many years. Okay. They actually received money, a significant amount of money at the start phase from Ingrid Newkirk. And from day one, they were saying, what we're going to do is completely different from anything PETA ever did before. I wouldn't quite say they were hating on PETA, but they were very vocal and very active in saying, look at the methods PETA has used. That's not effective. That doesn't work at all. What we're doing, this is new era thinking. Do you know that term? This is new era thinking. The old era of PETA is over. We have this fundamentally new, fundamentally different method from anything that's been done before. Therefore, it's going to work. Therefore, everything now is going to be different. Okay. Here we are in 2023. The methods used by Direct Action Everywhere are absolutely identical to those used by PETA. They do not have any new ideas. But their claim, the claim on which they recruited volunteers, in which they recruited several $1 million, I don't want to exaggerate, but it's several $1 million in donations. And apparently, again, to my knowledge, the donors included Ingrid Newkirk. I don't know how much she gave in total. Someone whose career was tied to PETA. The premise was that what they were doing was fundamentally, categorically different from any ecological movement that came before, any vegan movement that came before, and that it was going to be more effective than any movement that's come and gone before, because they alone had done the social science research. They alone had learned the lessons of history. It was an objective fact, established and proven by social science research, that what they were doing was going to be effective, was going to change the world, was going to change the planet, right? And again, incongruously, these bold new ideas, they didn't come from one man. It didn't come from someone you could interview, someone you could question. It didn't come from someone where you could read his book and say, oh, I've read his book. I know his proposal. I know his idea. Or you could even read his essay, read his article, right? There was this early stage where it was a mask without a face, supposedly an acephalous, egalitarian, fully horizontal organization, right? And then what's revealed in the end, of course, it looks more like a cult leader. That's what it looks like. Guess what? Wayne Seong and his sister, they're the ones with the control of the bank accounts. And, guess what? It's not so egalitarian. Now, it is remarkable. Wayne Seong eventually retired from his position. And it's now a younger woman who's in charge of Direct Action. Wayne Seong had this much charisma. I mean, to me, he's a very stupid guy. I don't think he's a well-spoken guy. Just being blunt. In one word, I think he's an idiot. Nevertheless, he was replaced by a younger woman who is even less charismatic. So if Wayne Seong had this much charisma, she's a straight up zero. I would not say, by the way, that she's stupider than Wayne. Wayne's stupid. But remember, I keep putting this out in three categories. They're kind of philosophical ideas. There are political aspirations, political ambitions, political objectives, things you want to attain. And then there are the methods you're going to use and the methods you're going to refuse to use. What she lacks is any concept of a new or different method. And that's what it comes down to. What it comes down to is, what are you doing this weekend? What are you doing next Monday? What are you doing 3 months from now? It ultimately, it all has to come down to methods. Now, I've been talking about very, very direct forms of political engagement here, but I would just point out, it's the same with filmmaking, right? So, guys, let's just say, okay, we now have 22 people in the audience. We could do a quick poll. Hey, guys, what's your favorite vegan documentary? What's your favorite film that promotes veganism? We'll get a whole bunch of examples. So I don't know, the Earthlings thing, Forks Over Knives, the one about athletes, the one about the cowspiracy, the one about water pollution. Okay. So okay, and now let me just say, like, we'd have to be face to face in a cafe. Well, let's say I sit there and say to you, if I give you 6 months, do you think you can come up with a better storyboard for a film than that? Notice I didn't say a better idea for a film. I said a better storyboard, right? The storyboard means you've thought about it minute by minute, what's in this film. So the storyboard, if people are just talking to each other, that's easy to storyboard. But when you have fight scenes or science fiction, special effects or something, then it gets quite detailed what you got to storyboard. Okay, if I give you 6 months, you don't think you can come up with better? See, now we're not talking about philosophy. We're talking about methods. So do you actually have a method you're bringing to filmmaking? Do you have means, techniques, right? Not even ideas. Do you have methods that will make a better film, whether it's documentary? And you know what? I think all 20 people in this audience who've given this video a thumbs up, I think all of you are smarter than the creators of Cowspiracy. Every single fucking one of you. Again, I don't know if 200 people will see this video or 2,000. Safe estimate would be 1,000. Probably this will reach 1,000 people. Regardless. So if 1,000 people see this video, probably 800 of you or something. I don't know, 200 of you. 200 of you legitimately have to look in the mirror after watching this video and say, nope, I just can't do it. I ain't got no ideas. I can't improve on Cowspiracy. There's nothing to offer. But for real, like, again, you see how I'm setting the bar here? I didn't ask you, have you read Herodotus? Have you read Thucydides? Have you read Cicero? Do you have something intelligent to say about it? I didn't ask that. I didn't ask, can you offer a better analysis of the origins of the American Constitution and the way in which it does and doesn't relate to ancient Greco-Roman philosophy than me? That's not what I asked. Again, it's interesting to ask that question about Wayne Seong, about the former leader of Direct Action. It's interesting to ask that about the current leader of Extinction Rebellion, of Animal Rebellion, now called Animal Rising, of Nation Rising. I think that is an interesting question to scrutinize the person, the man, the woman, what have you. It's an interesting question to ask. But I'm setting the bar way the fuck lower here, right? And, I'll just give you another example. For many of you, you haven't looked at these books in many years. Any book by Dr. Seuss, I don't really care which one. We could take the one with Oobleck. So you remember that one? The one with Oobleck, it's a Dr. Seuss story, and it's a very clear allegory for deforestation, pollution, ecology. If you go back and read that as an adult now, if I give you 6 months, can you storyboard a better book, better children's story book dealing with ecology? Right? Can you come up with a better idea for film? I don't think any of you will be intellectually intimidated by Dr. Seuss. Okay, Dr. Seuss was not a genius. And let me just mention 2 more names who come up again and again and again in this literature, the literature of current leaders in the vegan movement and in the ecological movement. I don't know if a single one of you is stupider than Mohandas Gandhi. Gandhi was an idiot. Okay? Martin Luther King Jr. All right, I'm well aware of the symbolic significance Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has in the history of the United States of America. Just like Mohandas Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., I don't think he was morally a good person. I don't think he was intellectually an impressive person. And again, have you as an adult gone back and listened to his sermons? Have you really? I mean, I know, like in both cases, what do you respect about this guy? That he died? That he got killed? Like, is that the basis for your respect for him? Like, I get it. Obviously, I support political equality for African Americans, for Black people in the United States. Of course I do. Of course I do. But if you ask me, like, do I think the members of my audience should look back at the intellectual achievements of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and think, wow, man, there's just no way. There's no way I can fit into those shoes. And guess what? If you start doing the research, you're going to figure out you're smarter than Cicero. You're going to figure out you're smarter than Thomas Jefferson. You're going to figure out you're smarter than the founding fathers who wrote the Constitution and founded the United States of America. Here I am in Canada. What the fuck am I going to say? The people who wrote the fucking Constitution of Canada? You think anyone is intellectually impressed with these people? And now what? What happens when you realize someone like Wayne Seong isn't smarter than you? I mean, should I even mention Paul Bashir, like the other vegan leaders who are out there who don't remotely pretend to be intellectual? Do any of you think you're stupider than Paul Bashir? And again, just to these three categories. They're philosophical ideas. There are more specific, like actionable political objectives, aspirations, ambitions. So philosophical ideas, political objectives. And then there's the question of methods. And each and every one of these movements, whether vegan or non-vegan, I'm going to talk about Extinction Rebellion in a moment. Extinction Rebellion is non-vegan, but it's an ecological movement. They came in on the basis of very particular promises that their method was going to work. It was going to work like nobody else's method had ever worked before. And again and again and again. I just heard Roger Hallam talking about this earlier today. Roger Hallam is still playing dealing out the same deck of cards. Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr. He is placing the same cards on the table. And guess what the point is? He's pointing at that card, and then he's pointing at himself. And he's telling you to open up your wallet and donate money to him because he's so fucking special. Because he's so superior to you, the same way Martin Luther King Jr. supposedly was, the same way Mohandas Gandhi was. I've said this again and again throughout my whole career. I am not concerned about the weakness of our leadership. I am concerned about the weakness of the followership. What the fuck is wrong with you people? What the fuck is wrong with people who donate money to James Aspie? What are you donating money to? And I could say this again for Paul Bashir, and I could say this again for Direct Action Everywhere. I could say this again for all these fucking movements, right? Now, to be fair, to argue against my position, the best possible answer, and for some of you this will be true, for some people who see this video, for some of you this would have been true 5 years ago and it's not true today, for some of you it's true today. If you really look in the mirror and you dig around your heart of hearts, the truth is that what was there for you to believe in was a method. These people promised you they had a method that was better than PETA. You already know PETA doesn't work. That's why you don't donate money to PETA. All right? They promised you they had a method to change the world. So for me, one of the clearest examples of this, although all of the theory and rhetoric is very, very similar to Wayne Seong, which is to say Direct Action Everywhere, the founding rhetoric and methodology of Extinction Rebellion, right? Sort of season 1 Extinction Rebellion, when they first came out of the gate, and as they say themselves proudly, within 6 months, they had 200,000 members and all this support. And the British mainstream press is totally to blame for this. They were in the newspapers, and their acts of civil disobedience were richly rewarded with publicity by legacy media, by old media, whatever you want to say. Their own YouTube channel doesn't get that many viewers. It's really newspaper, radio. They get interviewed on mainstream television, on breakfast TV programs, serious news journals, and so on. They keep getting promoted this way by old media within the United Kingdom. In Canada, that would not happen. It doesn't happen. In some other culture, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar. If you think you pull this shit off, even Hong Kong, you think the pro-democracy protesters who use disruption as their method in Hong Kong are appearing on breakfast television, are being interviewed by TV in Hong Kong? No. How many of them are still alive? How many of them are in jail? No, there are cultures where this is not rewarded. And Roger Hallam is always getting arrested and brought into court, all these different things. It's interesting sort of tightrope they're walking in terms of doing blatantly illegal activities. But Extinction Rebellion, just like Wayne Xiong, Direct Action Everywhere, right? The method you were donating money to was the myth of disruption. All right. There's a very, very small kind of playlist of seemingly respectable social science citations that are offered here, including Erica Chenoweth. Jesus, this is the most laughable shit. And again, I won't tell the story at length because I've told the story before. The one time I spoke to the founder and leader of Extinction Rebellion, Roger Hallam, which was via a Skype-like, long distance thing, what I pointed out to him was that Erica Chenoweth's thesis and his whole hypothesis about disruption and pro-democracy movements, that empirically it was blatantly untrue. That simply you are referring to the Arab Spring as a success when it was a failure and a disaster. Have you been to Libya lately? Anyone in the audience been on vacation in Libya? Have you been to Syria lately? Even Egypt is pretty fucked up. How did the Arab Spring turn out for people who are actually in the countries that were part of the Arab Spring? You have no fucking human heart. How did your fucking Arab Spring methods? How did the pro-democracy movement go in Myanmar? How did it go in Hong Kong? And right at that moment, when I was talking to Roger Hallam, the Hong Kong thing was ongoing. And I said, look, just a few months from now, if you really believe in this, you believe in this stuff, what do you predict? What do you think is going to happen in Hong Kong? Do you really believe these methods, this disruption? Because he himself, I hadn't put the words in his mouth. I didn't say Hong Kong is a great example of your theory that proves that it works, or that Hong Kong is a great example of your theory that proves that it does not work. That's what he said. He put forward Hong Kong, right? And again, same with Wayne Xiong, all these people, Arab Spring, Hong Kong, etc. This is all based on lies. Now, I've talked about this in other videos. If you go deeper, there are also lies about the Vietnam War. There are some other lies. There are lies about Mohandas Gandhi. There are lies about Indian independence. There are lies about Martin Luther King. There are lies about how segregation ended in America. There are lies about the civil rights movement and what actually made the difference and what worked. Guess what? The assassination of JFK turned out to be a really important thing in the history of America. What a surprise. Guess what? The question of who was president of the United States mattered more than sexy teenagers standing on a road chanting slogans. Guess why the Vietnam War ended? Not because of sexy teenagers wearing body paint, doing nude protests in Central Park in New York. It's just not true. So there are a lot of lies. There are lies on top of lies on top of lies here. And I just want to add, these are not left-wing lies. The right wing is fucked up by all the same shit. And when you look at the right wing, they're using the same methodology, right? They're just the same. They're phony revolutionaries who are soliciting donations on the internet by taking photographs of themselves doing disruption. There is no difference in tactics whatsoever. Guys, if you have something intelligent to say now. I did a couple interviews with a notorious YouTuber called Vegan Cheetah. He's back now. His YouTube channel was gone for many years. There is now a YouTube channel again called Vegan Cheetah. And some of you might have a memory of this, but I had put forward this idea that comes from the largely forgotten political philosopher and revolutionary Louis-Auguste Blanqui. And one of the things I've said it various times, but I don't say it often. In the last 10 years, have I said this 4 times or something? But, once in a while I point this out, that, communism existed before Karl Marx, and various kinds of anarchism, various revolutionary philosophies were, in the air at that time. And, Karl Marx took the left wing off in a very particular direction with a very particular set of delusions. And there's no inevitability to that. One of his rivals, direct rivals, alive at the same time and involved in the revolution at the same time, was Louis-Auguste Blanqui. Now, the most striking difference between Louis-Auguste Blanqui and Karl Marx is that when Louis-Auguste Blanqui looks back at the history of Europe and the history of the world, he says, oh, do you know what really matters? You know what makes a difference? Conspiracies. The way to change the world is through an elite, top-down conspiracy. It's not through protests on the street. It's not through peasants, mobs of peasants rising up and protesting. It's not even mobs of peasants that rise up and burn down the castle or something. That's not what matters. And of course, there are a lot of strengths to this theory, because generally, even if a bunch of peasants get angry and burn down the castle, who takes over power in the chaos that ensues? It's normally a conspiracy. There may be several conspiracies that compete in a civil war or something, but it's actually a very strong argument. Now, I'm not going to argue to you that every significant change in the history of the world political was because of a conspiracy. But if we were having this conversation in 1963, the year today is 2023. 1963, it's like, you know what the problem is? We have a Christian-dominated society that's intensely homophobic. And really, we have to shift towards a kind of equal rights paradigm for gay marriage and inclusion of gay people inside, where gay people can have a job and not be worried of being fired because they're homosexual. We have to have a kind of honest and open approach to gay rights. How do you want to accomplish that between 1963 and 2023? Do you think it's going to be a bunch of sexy teenagers in Central Park who paint flowers on their body and dance around? Do you think, wow, well, look at these hippie flower child? I've got the chronology partly wrong. Probably 68 would be a better year to be talking about that. 63, I think that stuff would have been just getting started. 63 is more hula hoop. 68 is more flower children in the park doing political protests. But in any case, so bear with me. Endure my historical inaccuracies here if you want. You know what? If what we want is to really fundamentally change the world, we want to fundamentally, drastically change the world politically, we want to fundamentally, drastically change the world culturally, you know what? What we really need is a conspiracy of highly talented people. We're going to need lawyers. We're going to need documentary filmmakers. Start coming up with things. What kind of people need to get organized? And how many? 20 people? 50 people? How many you need? People who are sincerely concerned and well-intentioned about how to change the status of homosexuals within the United States of America or globally. How are you going to bring that about? Okay. Got another example for you. Let's say you're in Italy in 1983, and it's the same question. How are you going to transform Italian society? And by 1983, the gay rights thing has already made a lot of progress in the United States of America, but Italy is behind. Italy, the progress of feminism was much later in Italy, the progress of gay rights, everything's a little bit behind. How are you going to transform? Oh, I know. Let's do the same shit PETA does. Let's have naked women standing on the fucking sidewalk. Are you kidding me? Okay. Roger Hallam's Extinction Rebellion, naked women standing on the sidewalk. PETA, naked women standing on the sidewalk. Direct Action Everywhere, naked women standing on the sidewalk. The intellectual bankruptcy of these movements. I think you can see it philosophically, I think you can see it politically, but in this third category of methods, right? That's ultimately what counts. And that's ultimately what your fucking money is paying for, is the method and the mythology that lets you talk yourself into believing it's going to make a difference. And it's going to make a difference like nothing else ever did before. Any of these fucking movements and any of these fucking people, what do you think they're going to do in the next 5 years? I can look back at the last 5 years and see what they did. Then I can look forward. And I'm asking you right now, what the fuck is going to happen to me in the next 5 years? And each and every one of you really has a say in that right now. If Melissa and I have a newborn baby, I got other priorities, guys. This is reality. I don't know. Here's a hypothetical scenario. If I become the manager of a trailer park. There's a job I'm qualified for. It's something that doesn't even require. I become the kind of handyman and overseer of a trailer park. Mr. Leahy, wasn't that his job? If you don't know who Mr. Leahy is, this is a cultural reference here in Canada. Anyway, so if I become the manager of a trailer park and Melissa gets pregnant and we start raising a kid, okay, my options get real narrow for the next 5 years. And some of you might write to me and say, hey, I read your book and I'm so inspired. I want to do this, this, and this. And I say, look, bro, I only got a few hours on Sundays or something. One day a week, I got a few hours. But the rest of the time, I'm here sweeping up leaves at the trailer park. I'm here maintaining the trailer park and raising my kid in poverty, in third world conditions, first world country. It's not all bad. I hear very good things about trailer parks from Lauren Southern, for example. She has a very good time. She's raising a baby on a trailer park right now. Shout out to Lauren Southern, who I presume is somewhere in Nanaimo, somewhere quite close by where we are. I'm sure someone in my audience will dox Lauren Southern. I've never Googled exactly where she is, but she's somewhere close by to where we're living right now, on a trailer park, raising her kid in the forest. Anyway, I may take on other responsibilities, right? But actually, in the last 5 years, all of you have had the opportunity to very decisively change the trajectory of my life, what's going on with me. And you do right now. Maybe for the last time, maybe not. We will see. The memory I was conjuring up, I'm sure most of you don't remember that interview, and I did several interviews with Vegan Cheetah back in the day, is that it was striking to me that someone like him, someone who, as he put it, he himself claimed that he never read books except when he was in jail. He read the Game of Thrones books when he was in jail. That someone at his low level of learning, when I told him about this contrast between Louis-Auguste Blanqui and what happened with the left wing generally, that he got really excited. He got really interested. Why? Why is it so interesting and so exciting for someone like him? Because it takes the potential for political change. It takes the potential for radical, fundamental change out of the hands of a faceless mob of millions of people and puts it into the hands of small groups of people with particular faces and particular names and particular talents and a particular role to play, right? And on some level, we all fucking know that's true, all right? The American Revolution didn't happen because of a faceless mob of millions. It happened because of a couple very eccentric guys. I mean, the single most important, obviously, is frankly Benjamin Franklin. Now, Benjamin Franklin was of extraordinary. You can very easily say the American Revolution wouldn't have happened or wouldn't have happened what it did without Benjamin Franklin. You can list off the other people involved who were crucial in giving it its direction and quality in its early years. And there's a famous quote from Adams that to understand what happened in the American Revolution, you have to look at the 15 years before any of the fighting happened. You say, no, you're quite wrong to look at the period of the so-called revolution itself. That doesn't matter. That's just war. But it's in the 15 years before what happened in the newspapers, what happened in the intellectual discourse. That's the real revolution that happened, was the intellectual side of it. And it's not that many authors. It's not that many guys. There weren't that many people with brains who made that difference. So, guys, thank you for giving the video a thumbs up. We have 31 people here. We should have 31 thumbs up. I invited you a relatively long time ago. If you had anything intelligent to say, to say it. Oh, Thomas Paine. I roll my eyes. Of course you're right. Of course you're right. I just despise Thomas Paine. But yep, Tom Paine, one of those guys for sure. A lot of the other founding fathers also despised Thomas Paine. Yeah. Some other highly intelligent comments here. Quote, everybody Wayne Seung tonight. Everybody have fun tonight. I wouldn't be surprised if he used it as a campaign song back when he was standing for election. Another great comment. Quote, okay, ignorance, confidence, and naked women. Success is sure. So, hey, babe, I should open up to you. So, I mean, look, Melissa, in some ways, she's the worst person to ask about these things because none of it's new for her. Melissa and I talk a lot off camera. I mean, you've heard so much of this for so many years. But you know, at this moment, do you have anything, you know, that's on your mind that way? Sure. No, up to you. You look good. Come on.
I guess the main thing that I wanted to say is that I do find it inspiring to hear you say that, you know, we can take the power away from the faceless mob and put it into the hands of, you know, a small group of people. And additionally, you know, I like this idea that, you know, if you look at many of these names, which are from a young age, you hear that they're, you know, they're brilliant, important people, that you just have the boldness to say, no, they weren't brilliant. And you yourself might be more brilliant. You might have better ideas. So, you know, it's just actually making it happen is the step that a lot of people never get to. And, but I just, you know, I wanted to say, in my reading of history too, I've also really been shocked again and again at just how bad many of the people were who become famous, who become well known, how morally despicable I find them, and you know, just even in my own personal life, just how untrustworthy this person turned out to be. You know,
we've been using American example, but Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Voltaire. We could use other examples.
Yeah,
it's kind of appalling when you look at it.
Yeah, exactly.
These so-called geniuses and so-called paragons of virtue morally.
So realizing that, you know, this is your opportunity, you know, and I agree. Like, this is a moment where somebody could really influence Isel's life, and, you know, by extension, my life as well. But you know, you've been talking about this for months and years, even, you know, the crisis that you've been in, and it's you know, this is an opportunity if somebody
my crisis is their opportunity. Yes.
And it's just, you know, I don't want to be too much of a downer here, but, you know, when you were saying, like, how many people who are listening to this, you know, who are watching this, would not be able to come up with a storyboard better than Cowspiracy, or, you know, write something better than Dr. Seuss story if they have 6 months to come up with an idea for it. Well, you know, you've been doing this for 9+ years, so it's just hard to recognize that you've been saying these inspiring things for so long. And
and the irony is, I'll tell you someone right now who can't come up with a better idea in 6 months: James Aspie. I'll tell you someone else, so-called Ask Yourself, Isaac Brown. Like, I'll tell you someone else, Richard Burgess, Vegan Gains. Like, Tofu Goddess. Like, the irony is that, like, what I feel are the minority of people who lack that ability have very much been on stage, front center. They've been the 1% of the opportunity. And, you know, apparently a great example would be Cosmic Skeptic. You know, whether it's due to stupidity or other factors, Cosmic Skeptic can't either. So it is remarkable how consistently the wrong people.
And so much of the time, you know, it turns out that people who have a certain amount of fame or respect to them from their audience, you know, it turns out that, you know, you know, Cosmic Skeptic is a good example of this. You know, he comes out as ex-vegan, he comes out as basically describing himself as a very vulnerable person, and, you know, explaining that his life is just in such a bad, you know, whatever is going on in his life, it's so bad that he's, you know,
he hasn't even told his parents about it. There's a specified crisis he wouldn't even tell his parents about.
Right. Yes. So it really seems like everybody who has been in power just can't get over whatever personal crisis they have and do something positively. So
Go, great.
Those were my thoughts.
So, you know, the final thought I want to share with you guys is this. When I talk about this three-way contrast, there's kind of the philosophy, the political agenda, political aspirations, and then the methods. Veganism itself is a method. It's the ultimate tragedy, right? You know, what do you want? What's your real objective? Now, again, this is really where you get into the difference between left and right. I actually want democracy. Like, really, really genuinely. We were there, whether it's the left wing or the right wing. How interested is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in democracy? Really? I'm sorry. A lot of people are really comfortable with the absence of democracy. I'm not saying everything's bad about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. A lot of people benefit from the undemocratic aspects of our society as it now stands. I have never heard AOC talking about the importance of direct democracy. I have never heard her say, the problem with the war in Afghanistan is that there wasn't a referendum asking the American people if they wanted it, and then maybe 4 years later or 2 years later, or whatever it should be, and then asking them again if they still wanted it. Now, we all know, if you're old enough to remember, if you had a referendum on September 15th, 2001, the vast majority of Americans would have voted yes to start a war, whether with Afghanistan or whoever you blamed, whoever you pointed the finger at. Just a few days after September 11th, okay, but what about in 2006? What about in 2011? At what point had Americans had enough of invading and conquering Afghanistan, or invading? At what point would they have voted to conquer Iraq? Would they have voted for the aggression Trump carried out against Iran? Would the American people vote to have a war right now in Ukraine? I've never once heard, just to give a specific example, I've never seen or heard any interest whatsoever from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez about real democracy, okay? And again, real democracy, partly it goes back to Athens, partly it goes back to Rome, partly it's ancient, but it's partly a modern and ongoing concern right now. Have I ever heard any vegan other than myself raise the question of who elected Wayne Sion, of democracy within veganism? I mean, it's come up very briefly, repeatedly in this video, the issue of the unelected, self-appointed dictator for life for these organizations and how they raise money and so on. Guess a dollar is not a ballot, guys. It's really different. If it's just whoever has the most money that's in charge, then it starts to sound a lot more like a business, or a lot more like a religion, a lot more like a cult. We don't elect the leaders of religions. We should. I've always asked that question. Why don't you have an elected rabbi? Jewish people in a given neighborhood or whatever can elect their rabbi, and then they decide the rabbi is no good and elect somebody else. Why not? But that's not our tradition in the Western world. For a Buddhist temple too, for any other religion. Why not? I'm really interested in democracy, right? Nobody in the right wing is, and in my opinion, nobody in the left wing is either. Very, very few people are really interested in it. But when you look at the world that way, veganism, right? It's a method. When you look at the world in terms of ecology, in terms of carbon dioxide levels, et cetera, veganism is not an end in itself. Veganism is a method, right? Now, the ideal situation to be in is one of collaboration, in which nobody gives orders and nobody follows orders. Within the vegan movement, I have been in a situation in which either I could follow the orders of someone I actually consider to be evil, or I could be totally despised and alone, precisely because I would not play the game of follow the leader. How about you? In the last 5 years, how about you? In the next 5 years, what are you going to do to change that? And as much as I may despise Extinction Rebellion, okay, Google it right now, the parts per million chart for carbon, ppm carbon atmosphere. You can Google it right now also, the average ocean temperature. That's the one that really matters. As much as I may heap scorn on these other groups, I'm sorry to tell you, but I actually think we are dealing with a finite number of years.